What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Week 3 NFL Power Rankings show, and thank you for your patience. The plan is to get these out bright and early on Tuesday mornings. I had family in town this weekend. We went to the Panthers game on Sunday, and I just didn't catch a lot of game action on Sunday, so I needed to take some extra time to catch up on the football that we saw this weekend so that I'm not just talking out my ass here today. But yeah, we should be back to early Tuesday mornings moving forward. And week 3 here is definitely a fun one. Maybe the most fun power rankings week of the season because, week 1 happens and it's like, all right, what's real, what's not real? I definitely don't like to overreact to what we see week 1. But week 2 is the only week where the amount of information we have on these teams doubles within the season. And this is the week really where I can start to assess where I was wrong on these teams heading into the preseason. And we really see a lot of movement this week, maybe more movement than we'll see throughout the rest of the series this season. But let's go ahead and get started. Please do hit that like button as we dive in. And here we go. At the very, very bottom, a tier of their own, the delete tier. You know who it is, the Carolina Panthers. I was at this game, as I said, and it's this unspeakable weight bearing down on this team right now. And a lot of, there's split opinions on whether or not Bryce Young should have been pulled. I'm telling you, being there in person, you can tell the energy, the body language, the pressure. It's not just on Bryce Young. It's the entire team, the culture. It's unlike anything I've ever seen at an NFL game. And they had to take Bryce Young out of there. That pressure was destroying him, any semblance of the quarterback that he was at Alabama, entirely gone. And just, he has no confidence. The team has no confidence. I really think the only course of action here, the only, 1 in a million Death Star trench run potential for them to save Bryce Young is to take him out, hopefully put Dalton in, figure out what does work for this offense, and then maybe 2 months from now, they can plug Bryce Young back into that. But also, he just looks so terrible. There's a new staff here. There's 52 other players on the roster, all fighting for their jobs, trying to build a culture here. The leadership in place owed it to everybody else in the building to move on to the quarterback that isn't spiraling mentally right now. So I do think that's the right decision, but until we see anything from this team, this is feeling like, the 0-16 Browns team, the 0-16 Lions team, like a team that it just genuinely does not belong. So they are going to be in a tier of their own until we see any signs of life from the Carolina Panthers. But then we will jump up into our next tier, which I'm just going to label this as currently unserious teams. And that's going to start with the New York Giants. They lose again. I'm just going to try and keep things positive here. There's obviously a lot of negativity involved with this Giants team and where they're at, and a tough loss in a close game to the Commanders, who are coming up pretty soon here in these rankings. But at least they got Malik Neighbors going. He looks like a stud. The offensive line is playing better than they have since we were all wearing masks for COVID. I don't know. I'm searching, Giants fans. It's going to be a long season. Then we got the Denver Broncos at number 30. Definitely not the start they were hoping for. They draft the supposed high floor, low upside Bo Nix, and it turns out he's low floor, low upside. I don't know. It just isn't working. The defense is trying out there, but only so much you can do when the offense looks like this. Definitely one of the worst teams in the league in Denver. And then Tennessee at 0-2. They fought against the Jets, maybe even more than I expected them to. And there's certainly a talent jump across this roster compared to our last 3 teams. But I do continue to believe that this team just it lacks any semblance of an identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know kind of what buttons they need to push to finish and win football games. And Will Levis and his turnovers continuing again this week, that's just something that is going to be hanging over this team until they show that basically Will Levis isn't Jameis Winston. So a disappointing start to the season for the Titans, who fall down 1 in the power rankings this week. As our number 28 team, the Washington Commanders, jump up a couple of spots. I think the nicest thing I'm going to say here is this hasn't been at least to this point, a dumpster fire. They win this week against the Giants. The ground game looked great. The defense gave it their all. I still think this is arguably the least talented. There's a couple out there, but it's one of the least talented defenses in the league. There's only so much they can do on that side of the ball, and they really haven't shown any explosiveness through the air with Jaden Daniels, but it is good to see the ground game going. Nice win this week. This next one is tough. I really didn't know what to do with the Miami Dolphins, who fall down to number 27. Just one of the all-time gut punch Thursday night games for a team that you can have. Not only does the team come out flat and rudderless against the Bills, who they've consistently struggled against, but Tua plays really bad, and then he gets another concussion, and he is not going to retire. I'm not going to get into that. That's his decision. But he's not going to be here for an extended period of time. I mean, the last time this happened, he missed several weeks. I expect that's going to happen again. He might not retire, but I would think they're going to play this very safe. We don't really have a timetable for his return. And I think, seeing how flat they looked, seeing what this team has looked like without Tua over the last 2 years when he hasn't played, for all the crap Tua gets about being a system quarterback, he is that system, and very few quarterbacks can run it the way he does. I am worried about how this offense is going to look without him out there. And the defense, man, the run defense has been porous. Their win week 1 against the Jaguars, where they had to scrap that out, looks less and less impressive after seeing what the Jags looked like this week. So just like we did with the Packers last week when Jordan Love got hurt, and as I've done consistently throughout this series, when your quarterback goes down, that's a massive drop in these rankings when all these teams are ultimately pretty tightly knit. If they start to show some signs of life as a team without Tua, they'll get their praise and climb back up. But I don't think they stack up on a week-to-week basis right now all that well. Obviously, ranking number 27, falling down 19 spots in the power rankings. Now, before we do jump up to our next tier here, I want to let you guys know that Underdog is running a promo every single day of this first month of football. They are looking to help you get your season on Underdog off to the right start. And this week, the big one is Sunday's game, the Cowboys Ravens game of the week. You can put a CeeDee Lamb higher pick of a half receiving yard. Load that up with some of your other favorite picks for the week, and you can get massive payouts off of small entries. Their pick'em contests are just the absolute best. I highly recommend them. And now if you sign up using promo code TFG, or if you scan that QR code on the screen, they will give you a bonus match up to $1,000, and you'll support my channel in the process. So thank you to Underdog for sponsoring this video. And let's now go to our next tier in these power rankings. Surprising to me that the New England Patriots find themselves as the 26th ranked team here. I thought this was going to be a dumpster fire, and a credit to Gerard Mayo and the players on this roster. That has not been the case. This team has been the definition of frisky, but mostly unserious. Do I think this is going to lead to a playoff run for the Patriots? No, not at this point in time. But they have a plan. They are tough. They go about this in the right way. Their run game is really fun. You have a Keon White on the defensive side of the ball really breaking out, compensating for some of those losses this offseason in Matt Judon and Christian Barmore. And they really haven't missed too much of a beat, if any beat at all, going from Bill Belichick to Gerard Mayo calling plays on the defensive side of the ball. A tough loss, losing to the Seahawks in overtime this week, but I still think that's commendable. I mean, the Seahawks just have so much more explosiveness, so much more talent, and are just further ahead in their timeline than where the Patriots are. So they are absolutely frisky and have earned my respect out the gate this season. Then we have the Las Vegas Raiders. I shredded them last week for a brutal punt decision, but they bounced back in a big way with a massive upset against the Baltimore Ravens, storming back late in this game, just catching the Ravens completely off guard. But hey, Gardner Minshew playing out of his mind. These weapons are insane. Devontae Adams made some just vintage Devontae Adams plays. That toe-tapping catch down the sideline was just so beautiful. They've got Brock Bowers going. That dude is a beast. The defense really stepping up this week. Do I think this is going anywhere? No, but this team is absolutely frisky and can upset anybody any given week, I think, with their overall mentality and play style. So much more positive on the Raiders this week, entering the frisky but unserious tier. Then another big injury-related drop here on the LA Rams. Woof. The list of injuries is just, it's unfair at this point. Their entire O-line, half their secondary, their entire receiving core currently out. Puka, Cooper, and Tyler Higbee all out. I'm worried for Matthew Stafford's health, honestly. I mean, it didn't look good last week, and that was against the worst D-line in the league in Arizona. This is a guy that does get banged up. They've already kind of witnessed some injury-prone players getting hurt. Like, if we're just being real about it, that's what's going on here. They've taken risks with injury-prone players, and they're paying for it. Stafford is one of those guys. So I'm just worried about it. I'm not trying to speak it into existence. I want to see this team come back because I think Matthew Stafford right now is a top 5 quarterback in the league. I'm really worried. And this defense is just putrid right now. Absolutely putrid. So I just don't think this team is all that competitive. They obviously weren't this week, getting just slaughtered from, out the gate against the Arizona Cardinals. So a big drop this week for the Rams. We know they have the potential to climb back up, but for the time being, this team is absolutely unserious, even if we know that combination of Stafford and McVay is dangerous. Then I have the Indianapolis Colts at 23. Quite the disappointing week here for the Colts. And I got to say, I may have jumped the gun a little bit on my praise of Anthony Richardson, saying, well, he looks great. That's all that matters. Moved him up in the power rankings last week despite the loss. Perhaps, though, some big throws in that game were overshadowing some underlying weaknesses in Anthony Richardson game with the inaccuracies. And against the Packers and their defense in their home opener, he did not look good, man. Did not look good one bit. Did have some drops working against him. I'm not saying he looks like a bust or anything and going the complete opposite direction, but, to lose to Malik Willis and fall to 0-2 is obviously a tough pill for Colts fans to swallow. Again, not saying that's the book on Anthony Richardson, but he is going to have to get better so that he can more consistently capitalize on those insane tools that he does have. And it's not just him. Like, this run defense has been historically terrible out the gate. DeForest Buckner got banged up. I don't know what his future status is here, but that was an issue when we talked about this Colts team, is the lack of depth on the interior of the D-line, the safeties, the linebackers. The spine of that defense is very vulnerable, and that was on full display in Lambeau last week. A 9-spot drop for the Colts, as a lot of teams behind them won, but also perhaps overreacting to how good they looked in a loss last week, sheltering some more underlying issues there. Then I got the Chicago Bears at number 22. Hey, the defense is doing their thing. You got to give them credit there. Gervon Dexter seems to be taking a step forward here in year 2. Like, it's not all bad for Chicago, but offensively, man, This is tough. This is not the story that was promised for Bears fans. And there's, it's finger pointing season. And a lot of fingers are being pointed, obviously, at Caleb and fingers being pointed at Shane Waldron. Very similar and very difficult for Bears fans to be right back where they were last year, where it's like, it's the quarterback, it's the coordinator. Well, it's both. And this time around, at least last year with Fields, it was like, okay, well, Fields is in year 3 as an NFL quarterback, right? And even then, I feel like there were more open wide receivers in Luke Getsy's offense than what we're seeing right now in Shane Waldron's offense with worse talent. Here, it's like, okay, this is Caleb in his second start as a 21-year-old quarterback. And yes, you can be critical and say there are some open pass-ups. The ball does need to come out quicker, right? You are starting to get worried about the fact that was on his college resume, was sometimes he holds on to the ball too long. And That's showing up here in the NFL. Yeah, not the start you wanted to see there. He's struggling against the blitz as well. So I'm not trying to remove all blame from Caleb Williams, but right now this Shane Waldron thing is it's brutal. Bears fans were excited for him, but I was like, I don't know. I watched Seattle last year. They had a lot of play calling issues that Geno and DK and Tyler Lockett made up for. You see the same issues here in Chicago. The pass protection's terrible. Offensive linemen seem to be underperforming. They're already pointing fingers at Shane Waldron, just as Jackson Smith and Jigba did point fingers at Shane Waldron at the end of last season. We now see Jackson Smith and Jigba getting utilized and producing without him in Seattle. You've got DJ Moore not being involved in the offense. I mean, he's one of the easiest manufactured touch wide receivers in the league. Like, why are we throwing bubble screens to DeAndre Carter when those could be going to DJ Moore? Get him going. His body language in this game was eye-opening. So it's not a good start, Bob. It's only week 2. The season's not over. They can get this thing going in the right direction for sure, but how frustrating to see all this talent on offense end up with these results. It's tough. And then talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Just retweet everything we said last week on this show and my Fully Inflated Football podcast. It's the same damn issues that have plagued Doug Peterson's teams. The lack of a run game, the mental mistakes, the penalties. And it pains me to say, but Trevor Lawrence continuing to really not reach his potential, and I would say play inconsistently. I'm not going to put this whole loss on Trevor, but something's missing here, man. And an 0-2 start is not what they signed up for here. It really feels like this is trending towards the end of the Doug Peterson era unless they can straighten this thing out. You know, they've had some tough opponents to start the season, but tough break. You're in the AFC. That's going to be what you have to deal with here, and you theoretically should have the quarterback to match these guys and go win a game against Deshaun Watson. And the fact that you can compare the game plans of Doug Peterson to Mike McCarthy and say you got a team that played the Browns back-to-back and say, wow, Mike McCarthy drastically outcoached you putting together an offensive game plan against that tough defense. It's just horrible. So a -6 for the Jaguars down to the 21st spot. But then we got the Chargers at number 20, more positive here than our last 4 teams. And, really they're getting a +4 because the last 4 teams we talked about have fallen and looked really bad last week. The Chargers, it's like, yep, they came out, took care of business, and, we'll continue to assess what their real upside is. But, Chargers fans might get mad about this. But anybody that beats the Panthers this year probably isn't going to be getting too much credit for what they accomplished. But this idea, again, that Harbaugh is going to come in. This is a team that's not going to make mistakes. They're going to run the ball. They're going to be mentally tough and well-coached. That's applying to the Chargers right now. It's gotten them off to a 2-0 start in a, very, very favorable schedule to start their season. But then for our next team, we are going to jump up a tier. Forgive me for the ugly formatting here. We have so many teams tightly knit here in the middle that it made it tough to put this graphic together here. But the Cardinals at 19 are in our next tier of teams that are thinking playoffs here. And I know it sounds crazy because I don't think any of us truly trust this defense, a defense that got to go against the Rams B team basically this week. But dude, when you have what they currently have, the second best offense in per EPA as they do this year, with Kyler Murray playing damn near flawless football, looking like a legitimate MVP candidate, that was one of my main stances this year was like, dude, Kyler Murray has become the most underrated player in all of sports. And the Kyler Murray agenda is absolutely working right now. He looks insane. He's locked in. This offense is working. They got Marvin Harrison going this week. He looks every bit as good as promised. I really do think the Cardinals deserve to be mentioned with teams that could make the playoffs this year because, it might be a 9-win season and a wild card spot. I'm not saying they're going to win this division over the Niners, but even if this is a bottom 3 defense in the NFL because they lack so much talent on that side of the ball, if they're a top 5 offense, that can absolutely do it. So they look insane right now. They're only 3-point underdogs at home against the Lions this week. So Vegas agrees, like these guys are in the mix here. But then I do have the Green Bay Packers getting a +8 here this week. I did not see that coming. Honestly, Matt LaFleur has earned a lot of praise, but this was almost like a whole new step for what I think about him as a play designer, as a play caller, what he's capable of as an offensive coach. I think of his past designs being so brilliant when I think of Matt LaFleur. Not necessarily that this has been some unbelievable run game or overly creative as a run game. That was genuinely, that game against the Colts was Shanahan-y. It was absolutely Mike McDaniel-y, where the creativity of that run game was so impressive. The varied punches that they brought with all these jet sweeps, the counters, the misdirection, sprinkling in Malik Willis as a design runner, but not being over dependent on it and lazy with it. Like sometimes you'll see this where they're like, okay, the backup's in, let's just run read option. No, like they got so much more creative than that. I feel like they unlocked some aspects of this offensive line, getting them on the move a lot, like Josh Myers and Sean Ryan. Zach Tom is super good at that. And then these runners of the football deserve a lot of credit too. Josh Jacobs, who everybody crowned as a bust of a signing after 1 quarter of playing on a bad field in Brazil. No, he looks like the rushing champ again, the guy with the power, the vision, the contact balance. He looked unstoppable, and the Packers would have won this game by even more if he didn't, kind of uncharacteristically fumble the ball an inch away from the end zone. But Jaden Reed continuing to do his thing. They got Bo Melton on a jet sweep. Willis had some runs. Marshawn Lloyd had some runs. Like, what an outing. Kind of makes you think, like, they can hang. And Willis avoided mistakes. They held his hand. They didn't ask him to really do anything, but he made his throws when he needed to. So I definitely think this team can compete, and that's before we really mention the main story of this game for the Packers, and that was the defense. A tough first game in Brazil against the Eagles' firepower down there, but man, to make Richardson look like they did, the confusion, the aggressiveness, this was the dream for the Packers. So they're still going to have to scratch and claw with Malik Willis in there, and I don't think Love will play for a couple more weeks now, but getting that one win was huge because it really felt like, okay, if they can go the next 3 weeks and scratch out one win against the Colts, the Vikings, and the Titans this week, then you get Love back at 1-3 and you can get your season started. But they get that win in the first game and look like they can actually maybe beat a team like the Titans this weekend. We'll see how that goes, but I think few teams had better weeks than the Green Bay Packers here this week. But then at number 17, the Atlanta Falcons hold on to their spot here. Obviously an insane comeback and a huge win basically to justify this 17th spot. Did I see so much from the Falcons that I was blown away from them on a play-to-play basis? No, I think they're a very solid football team. I think their defense is currently overachieving. I'm worried about their overall pass rush. But they have stopped the run, a continuation of what they did last year. And the offense is definitely figuring themselves out. You have all these new pieces, and Kirk is figuring out what he's got in the tank, with the Achilles recovery. But just leaning into Bijan Robinson, who looks, with Christian McCaffrey hurt, he might be the best back in the NFL right now. He is so hard to stop right now. So they're figuring things out, but huge to steal that win in Philadelphia when it looked like a certainty that they were going to lose. And I think this is a fair spot for Atlanta for now. But then at number 16, the Seattle Seahawks getting a +3 after a tough win in New England this week. Geno Smith is a really good quarterback, man. It's hard to kind of get there because of his 10-year path to where he is now. But, God, he just played such a good game in New England. playing surgical within the structure of the offense when they need that, but the improvisation, the pocket presence, what he can add to the offense when it's not there, super impressive. And now we got to start to kind of ask, like, was Shane Waldron actually holding Geno Smith back? Because they've unlocked Jackson Smith and Jigba, provided a whole different wrinkle to this offense this week. And it's, there were definitely some manufactured touches to get him to help move the chains as he's capable of, but also felt like there was an exerted point at some point in the film room this week where it's like, Geno, if you don't like what you see, at least look at Jackson Smith and Jigba before you do anything, because more often than not, he is finding that underneath space and is a genuinely elite like safety blanket for him. And if they can consistently tap into that, get Kenneth Walker back, who was not available for them in this game, this team can really be in business. And the defense too. Mike McDonald's got these guys. I would say they've lived up to their hype. They're not perfect yet, but the pass rush is working and things are going well for Seattle. So breaking into the top half of the league here. But I do have the Pittsburgh Steelers at 15. I mean, their floor is just so high. No team in the league knows exactly what they have to do to win, how to execute that game plan, and can consistently do it thanks to their coaching. The same deal this week. Run the ball, don't let Fields make mistakes, and capitalize on a great defense. There's just not a ton of new information to add on the Steelers this week. Should be interesting to see how the Steelers-Chargers game goes, because to this point, those are two 2-0 teams that have basically just sat back and waited for the other team to make mistakes and capitalize on those mistakes when they make them. When's that going to happen in this game? Is it going to happen? Should be an interesting game for the football junkies out there. Then we got the Cleveland Browns moving down a spot, just with some other teams passing them up. I wasn't blown away by the Browns this week. I didn't completely tank them in the rankings last week because I still trusted that this defense was capable of getting them a win like they did against the Jaguars. I have so much confidence in Jeff Schwartz and all of the talent they have on that side of the ball. Did I see anything offensively that really blew me away from the Browns? No, not really. It felt like they kind of leaned into more of a conservative game plan, let the defense do the heavy lifting. It was good to see Watson not actively lose them the game, I suppose. It was more honestly Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore that really slowed down this offense this week. So my opinions on the Browns didn't really change too much this week, to be honest. I feel like we dropped them into a good spot for the most part last week, and this sounds about right to me for the Browns because I just don't trust that offense right now. But then at number 13, the Minnesota Vikings going up 5 spots this week. Wasn't quite sure what to think about them against the Giants in week 1, but to beat the Niners at home, that means this team is absolutely legit. And can we just give a big round of applause to this coaching staff? Like, they have collectively offense plus defensive coaching, top 5 coaching in the league. Like, how could you argue that? Kevin O'Connell is doing such a good job with this offense, and the Brian Flores is doing the same job he did last year, maybe even better, where he's got a relatively talentless defense playing like a top 5 defense in the league. It's just so impressive, man. I mean, Darnold looks really good. He's still like making a mistake or two every week, but they've been, unlike in his past, like well overshadowed by much better overall consistency, but making just 1 or 2 huge throws in both of his first 2 starts. He looks comfortable, man. It looks like this is going to be legit with this offense, and they don't even have all their playmakers out there, right? Like Hawkinson hasn't come back yet. Addison was out in this game. So that's all like rainbows and butterflies right now. And then Brian Flores, that game plan against Kyle Shanahan's offense was special. If you haven't watched it yet, check it out. Like the blitzes, the stunts, the varied looks, just throwing everything off in San Francisco and making Purdy uncomfortable. It was just brilliant, man. So blown away by Brian Flores, really from the second he's gotten here. So couldn't have really drawn up a better start for the Minnesota Vikings this season. Although there is one team that has been even more surprising, maybe 2 teams. but especially here, the New Orleans Saints. As I said last week, they looked insane, but it was against the Panthers, so I didn't really know what to make of that. I wanted to see what it looked like against Dallas, and then they just did the exact same thing. Dismantled the Dallas Cowboys. This is one of the biggest surprises I can remember, not just in terms of like a bad team that ended up being good, but for a team that I thought was just so uninteresting, so boring and milquetoast, to be probably the most fun team to watch in the NFL through 2 weeks. I don't remember a situation where that happened. And all of the hype regarding Clint Kubiak, like that's all you've heard about with this Saints team, but maybe not everybody is paying close attention. The hype is legit. Like, he has come in and looked like one of the best play callers in the NFL out the gate and just completely morphed this offense, finding the talent that they have in this roster and just getting the absolute most out of it. That's what great coaching is, right? And I was watching this, and for a moment I was thinking, I was like, am I crazy to say that this feels like the Niners offense? And then I was like, oh, well, yeah, of course it does. I forgot that Clint Kubiak just spent a year with Kyle Shanahan, and just the way that they have all these unique skill sets, just as they do in San Francisco. Now, I'm not saying Tyreek Hill is Christian McCaffrey and Rashid Shaheed is Deebo Samuel or anything like that. Like, they don't quite have the absurd superstars that the Niners have, but the way that they use these guys, where they all have specific skill sets, that they are just pushing the right buttons at the right time, getting these guys in position to succeed, getting the most out of a lesser offensive line, as the Niners have done for years and years and years. And then they have Chris Olave, who is literally their Brandon Ayuk. He's your route runner when you have to have a tough play. They've got him there. And then Carr is playing great. And that's before you even talk about Dennis Allen doing his thing with that defense. As low as I was on the Saints, I did, at least in the Saints deep dive, give Dennis Allen credit for being one of the best defensive coaches in the league. So that's all working on that side of the ball. They're flying around. They have been playing bully ball, kicking ass, and just popping off the screen. So I will, Saints fans, give you the respect they deserve. It's just week one was the Panthers, so it just took me a second. I think that's fair. But now into the top 12 for the Saints. I really hope this can continue, because they are a joy to watch. And then, unfortunately, they're going to be the next team with a defensive head coach to have that fork in the road moment, because Clint Kubiak is not going to be long for this team as an offensive coordinator if he's calling plays like this. But then we got the Tampa Bay Bucks at number 11, another team that I was slow. Week one, they played the Commanders. They looked really good, but I was like, I was lower on this team coming in, just as I was with the Saints, but let's see what next week looks like against Detroit. And they played a great freaking game. Like, I think Baker Mayfield looks so good, better than he ever has in his career as a prospect. He has really come into his own with this Bucs team, where he's being surgical from the pocket when those opportunities are there. He's playing on time. He's throwing with anticipation. They're getting Godwin going. You name it. But what he's bringing to the table with his confidence and really just his physical tools to extend plays, he's not this crazy athlete, but he is elusive. He's agile, but he's built like he kind of, some of these runs and these scrambles and the way he's breaking off sacks, it kind of reminds me of like Kareem Hunt in terms of that like stocky contact balance running back. Like, Baker is a load to get down right now, and he's weaponizing that in play extension and really doing some crazy shit. He's playing, and you guys know I don't say this lightly, but through 2 weeks, Baker Mayfield is playing like an elite quarterback in the NFL. Does he continue that? We'll find out, but it's so impressive. And then Todd Bowles, again, very similar to the Saints, where it's like, yeah, I mean, he's a great defensive coach. They're doing their thing on that side of the ball, and they were really impressive with how they were flying around and hitting dudes on that side of the ball. So just a huge, huge win to go into Detroit, win that game, get to 2-0. And for the Bucs and Saints, like, I don't know when they play, but for that to be a matchup that I can't wait for already 2 weeks into the season is a very pleasant surprise. But that is going to round off that playoff caliber tier. And now we're going to get into more of the playoff contenders, teams that I do see as a little bit more Super Bowl potential teams. And that's going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals. I know they're 0-2, but they looked like the Bengals against the Chiefs this week in Arrowhead. Very easily could have won that game. Joe Burrow looked like Joe Burrow. They still don't have T. Higgins back. This team has had much worse starts than they have here in 2024, and I really think they're going to be just fine. They're not perfect. They, I think, ride a thin margin for error. But when you have a quarterback like Joe Burrow, as we've seen with this team, you're allowed to do that. So they're actually moving up a spot despite losing this week and falling to 0-2. Their next two games are Commanders and Panthers. So, if they lose one of those games, we can start to panic here, but you can essentially write them in as 2-2 already. Then we've got the Dallas Cowboys at number 9. What a tale of two halves of this season so far. They look dominant the first week, and then the next week it's like they're right back to the team that we had worries about with how they lost last year. The lack of run defense. They're skinny in the middle of that defense. Their interior of the defensive line is bad. Their linebackers are bad. They're playing Maurice Luafau, who I thought was overdrafted. Eric Kendricks doesn't look like he can get to the ball in the run game to me. I know Cowboys fans are excited about Overshown, but he's a safety playing linebacker effectively, so he doesn't help the run defense concerns. There's a script for how you beat this Cowboys team, and if you follow it like the Saints did, you're going to be able to beat this team, but it does take the right team with the physicality to run the ball like that. And I also think the Saints defense, for what it's worth, Cowboys fans, if the script is to double CeeDee Lamb and force someone else to beat you, Dennis Allen is the double team god. Like, he is going to be the coordinator that does that. It's actually much more rare than you'd think for teams to legitimately just double team your best wide receiver. Dennis Allen put together a very good game plan. Not every team in more zone-heavy systems is going to be able to pull that off. So it was a tough matchup for the Cowboys, but for them to not be able to change gears and play in a different way is concerning. And just the penalties, the mistakes, you hate to see that too. So, yeah, Cowboys are coming down 2 spots, a little closer to how we viewed them coming into the year. Then I have the Baltimore Ravens at number 8. They just feel a little disjointed right now. I don't think you panic, but you got to find a way to finish that game against the Raiders. And the lack of a run game to do that is interesting. Like, if we thought anything was going to be working here for Baltimore, we felt like this run game should be pretty damn good, and that just hasn't been the case. Derrick Henry has just not looked good in this offense. It doesn't feel like it feels the same as it did last year, where it feels like this offense is just throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks, and then the second they find out what sticks, they just keep throwing shit at the wall. It's like they at some point have to figure out what the identity of this offense is. They have a scheme. They have a general idea of what they want to do with Lamar and Flowers and the 2 tight ends and Derrick Henry, but it is a team that lacks identity offensively. And the defense just, they can't let that up. Ravens fans, your boy Brandon Stevens had a rough day. Do we start to get some more of their first-round draft pick? Nate Wiggins out there, who didn't play here in this game against the Raiders. That's maybe something to keep an eye out for. But, I'm not panicking, but I was a little lower on the Ravens coming into the year, and it definitely doesn't feel like my opinion has changed on that. Like, they're going to be a good team, but I just see a lot of issues on this team, and that's obviously before we even talk about the offensive line that struggled again this week. So they're a good, solid team that definitely has some holes. And then we got the New York Jets at number 7, the only team in last week's top 8 other than the Chiefs that won. Yet I'm actually going to lower them because the premise for this Jets team was the offense just has to be solid. And I would say the offense has been solid. I talked about this last week against the Niners, where it's like, well, they were actually moving the ball. They just had some easy things to clean up and some bad luck on an interception, but play by play, they were actually moving the ball. I thought Aaron Rodgers looked pretty good. And I feel pretty similarly this week against the Titans. But this defense, yes, they played better against Tennessee, but it certainly wasn't a dominant outing, and they bunkered down at the end of this game, finished the job in the end. But the pass rush is not there. I don't know where the hell Quinnen Williams is. None of these other guys have really stepped up. I definitely thought the Hassan Reddick situation would have played out by now. They don't seem to have an end in sight for that. They just lost Jermaine Johnson for the year. So that's really where I'm worried, man. Like, they've got to find a way to get after the quarterback, or they are probably going to end up putting too much pressure on this offense. I still think there's a lot to work with here, and you're encouraged by the fact that the offense is doing their thing. Rodgers isn't playing like an elite quarterback, but it's, he's playing like the best quarterback the Jets have had in at least the 21st century, making a couple big throws a game, taking care of the football, Oregon, like, basically being that on the field offensive coordinator. So there's good stuff here for the Jets, but I do want to see that defense tick things up here. I do trust Robert Saleh to figure some things out, though, as the season goes on. But definitely got to give the Buffalo Bills credit, right? Like, week 1, it was against the Cardinals, which, we didn't know too much about the Cardinals last week, but this week for them to come out in Miami, and even before the Tua injury, like, they were so well prepared. This team is so well coached. Their run game is dominant, man. Josh Allen is in a spot right now where he feels like he's control of the offense. They have a plan. It still kind of feels like that structured randomness where they don't have a go-to option. They don't have, like, go-to plays necessarily, but they can beat you in a lot of different ways. He can play point guard, and then when he needs to, he can make those big superhero plays. Taking care of the football so far. Like, I think other than one sack fumble against the Cards, I don't recall him really putting the ball in harm's way. And I think when they have this sort of kind of ball control offense, it does take a lot of pressure off the defense. Bills fans will want me to give them a ton of credit for their defensive performance against the Dolphins. I'm still not entirely sold. I was not impressed by them week 1 against the Cardinals, and it felt like it was much more Tua playing horrible and just timing issues from the receivers that led to easy interceptions for the Bills. That's still a box I want to see them check, is that I trust this defense, because I still don't. But when Josh Allen is playing like this, they're gonna be in business, to say the least. So they have absolutely impressed me. Unlike my Super Bowl champion pick heading into the year, the Detroit Lions, I'm starting to get worried about that. Like, the whole core of my confidence to do that was that Jared Goff is good now, right? He had gone 2 full seasons, basically, of really high-end quarterback play. I thought he was pushing that second tier of quarterbacks in the league with his processing, his decision-making, his command of the offense. What happened to that? The last 2 weeks, he's looked like the Jared Goff that the Rams wanted nothing to do with, that they traded away, and they're winning despite that. So it's like, on one hand, if he can just go back to playing good football, they're going to be just fine. But on the other hand, it's like, is he going to do that? Because I don't feel like he's getting a ton of pressure, or that the play calling's bad, or that receivers aren't getting open. He's just making bad reads, and when there is pressure, he's crumbling under it. But that's going to happen in the NFL. You can have the best O-line in the league. You're still going to have to make throws under pressure. So he's got to turn it back around, or they're going to start. I mean, they did lose this week, right? But that's going to keep happening, because he got severely outplayed by Baker Mayfield in this game. Severely outplayed. Not time to panic, though. They were right in it. They had a really costly mistake in this game before half, where they were trying to. Half the team was trying to spike it so that the field goal unit could come on, and then the field goal unit ran onto the field. So the clock was running, they spiked it, but the Lions had like 25 players on the field, 22 players on the field, and they obviously got penalized for it. They get the 10-second runoff. They missed out on those 3 points. That was a huge difference in this game. So it's not panic time, but they even going back to week 1, I didn't think they blew me away. And also, like, where the hell is Sam Laporta? Hello, you have him. You can use him. Ben Johnson. It's like the first time I've questioned Ben Johnson's play calling in a long time, just in the fact that it feels like they forgot about him ever since Jameson Williams broke out. It's like, you can use both those guys. It's okay. But then you got the Eagles at number 4. I mean, you could go in multiple different directions here. You know, you could take the panic approach because it's the Eagles on Monday Night Football, self-imploding, and that was the narrative last year. I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm not that worried. You know, number 1, A.J. Brown got pulled like last second in this game with a hamstring injury, so they had to kind of adapt whatever they had been planning all week. I mean, that's their best freaking player. So that threw a wrinkle in things for sure. People forget, like, A.J. Brown wasn't there in that Bucs playoff game where they looked so bad last year. He was obviously a huge part of their week 1 win. So it sounds like he'll miss a couple weeks. But even in this game, they showed like they're still a damn competitive football team without him. You know, their run game is incredibly tough to stop. Their defense played really well up until the moment where Vic Fangio just couldn't help himself but play prevent defense. And it's like, oh, Vic. It's like his Achilles heel, man. So, you know, if Vic Fangio gets the green light to just play 4 safeties 20 yards back every play, he'll do it. So, you know, they had some frustrations on Monday night, but I really do think they're going to be just fine. Like, there's nothing as I look forward that I'm super worried about. People were going at Nick Sirianni for calling a pass at the end of the game. It's like, well, Saquon's got to catch that ball too. Like, you know, it was there. He should have had it. That is a thing for Saquon, is he's dropped like 6 passes every year for the last 3 years. So go hit the jugs, Saquon. But I think you look play by play and say the Eagles are going to be just fine. They keep their number 4 spot. But they do get jumping up 6 spots here, the Houston Texans. I'm ready, man. You know, coming into the year, I had them 10th, very respectable ranking, but I was like, you know, I tend to be a guy that likes large sample sizes, slower to react with some of these younger teams. And we definitely knew this upside was possible for the Texans, and we'll see if they hold this as the year goes on. But what a great start for Houston. Just 2 mostly convincing wins. You know, it's not like they've had these perfect blowout games, but they've been, I would say, very complete games. Stroud looks just so freaking good, man. Like, you could not tell that that's a year 2 quarterback, between his processing, his playmaking out of structure. Just, again, the Joe Burrow comps, I pushed back on it when CJ Stroud was coming out. I definitely didn't see that version of him at Ohio State, but NFL CJ Stroud is very, very Joe Burrow-esque, except he's got a better arm. So you have that with all these playmakers, a defense that woke up. Great to see that. I mean, the pass rush wasn't there week 1 against the Colts, but Danielle Hunter had an amazing game. Like, great to see that addition working. The secondary's been playing well. You know, Lassiter's been good as a rookie. Stingley has a much better game this week. So, like, yeah, you're feeling damn good as a Texans fan right now. And if they kind of keep this up, they'll only keep climbing up. Like, the Super Bowl is on the table for the Texans this year. It always was, but it feels even more obtainable now than it did heading into the year. But then as we go to my top 2 teams here, I think some people following the series are going to be a little surprised that I don't have another tier left in these rankings. I think all these top 10 teams are tightly knit right now. You know, I have the Niners at number 2. They're dealing with some real injury stuff right now. You know, if they had a fully healthy Debo and Christian McCaffrey, you can make a case that they're a tier above the rest of the league, but they don't. And then for the Chiefs, like, they're 2-0. They're the Super Bowl champs. They look great. They're my number 1 ranked team, but they've squeezed out 2 wins against 2 of these top 10 teams, right? They easily could have lost to the Ravens or the Bengals. So, yes, they are my number 1 ranked team, but do I think they're a tier above all these guys? No, I don't. And I think the Hollywood Brown injury, losing him for the season, is a little bit of a blow for what I consider to be their upside, because Xavier Worthy's fun, but I don't think he can be a guy that can beat man coverage and get open in the way that I thought Hollywood Brown was going to be able to do for them. So I do think that's a blow. But I don't want to gloss over what happened this week on these teams. You know, I think the Niners loss is unfortunate. It's nothing to panic about. They still played pretty well, but they ran into a unique mismatch there with Brian Flores' defense doing the things that he was able to do to stunt this machine that is the Niners offense. I'm old enough to remember last Monday when they had probably the most impressive overall performance that any team had on the season, and that came, in a game where Christian McCaffrey wasn't playing as well. So I'm not panicking about the Niners. I still have them at number 2, and then, of course, the Chiefs at number 1. This team is far from perfect. Like, the whole Kingsley Suamataia at left tackle thing, that's not an option if he doesn't get better. Like, he gets benched in this game. Mahomes in this offense straight up just didn't look that good. Like, yeah, they end up with 26 points in this game, but Mahomes tried to throw 3 interceptions in this game. He did throw 2, only 150 yards. They lose Pacheco for an extended period of time. Like, they're working through some stuff too. Like, yes, they're 2-0 and they've won these close games, but they are far from coasting their way to a three-peat right now. But that is going to do it here for the Week 3 Power Rankings show. Thank you so much for watching. You guys will have to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Where I'm too high on teams, where I'm too low on teams. Always fun discourse in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys for the Fully Inflated Football Podcast tomorrow over on the Fully Inflated YouTube channel or on your audio feeds wherever you get your podcasts. So we'll see you there. Peace out.